Sorry. I was sorry to interrupt you. Just I guess Craig interrupted you, but welcome to the Yang Gang Roundtable. It is 10:01, Friday, May 29th. Having a real, casual Friday, first of the weekend warm-up episode. So I'm here with Disdonn and Jeremy, and we're just hanging out. And before I rudely interrupted Don by bringing Craig in here and having him announce that he's recording, he was saying how we're going to turn into essentially Nazi Germany. So that's.
I mean, right now.
Let's go ahead. Start. Yeah.
We've got police arresting press with official press badges just because they're people of color. We have mass riots happening in one major city and protests and possibly riots in other major cities after we've only been reopened from the pandemic for 2 or 3 weeks, and we've had 3 mass shootings and 2 black people killed by police officers. So, I mean, it's back to, business as usual in the United States, and Trump's tweeting, inciting shit saying that, he wants to start bringing the military out to start shooting protesters and looters, and it's going to get bad. It's going to get really bad, and I have a feeling that it's the beginning of the end for our democracy. That's
kind of a crazy prospect. I mean, when you're exposed to hyperbolic news all the time, it's so hard to re-engage and go, yeah, maybe this is gonna really be something to pay attention to. But who knows? I hope you're not right, but maybe you are. What do you think, Jeremy? How do you feel about all this?
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure. Yeah. I said one point I was making or kind of noticing this morning is that I think that the Minneapolis unrest has surpassed the 1992 LA riots.
Oh, for sure.
Which the LA riots caused $1 billion in property damage, and I think when the number is finally calculated for what has happened in Minneapolis, it's going to be beyond fathomable, and I'm not sure. Well, I'm of two minds with this situation. On one hand, yes, something must be done against race relations with the police force, but at the same time, I don't think burning down your fucking city is the appropriate response either, right?
If you look at the buildings that they started burning down, they started with the police station.
Well, no, they didn't. They started with an AutoZone and with a Target. The police station
AutoZone and the AutoZone and the Target were done by an undercover police officer.
See, I don't believe that either, man.
That was revealed yesterday.
Well, I mean, kind of. I mean, there's a screen cap of a potential text message conversation with his ex-wife. I mean, that's all they have.
Why would the police do that?
Because the police are not to protect and serve anyone but the rich and the powerful.
But why would they burn an AutoZone down?
So that they could give justification for utilizing violence against protesters.
All right. Well, let's even consider. Perhaps they did. I mean, did they burn down the Family Dollar? Did they burn down the gas station? Did they burn down the liquor store? Did they burn down There's so many fires in that city right now. There's no way that the police are responsible for every fire that got set last night.
No, but they're responsible for starting the first one. And at that point, when people realized that they were going to be blamed for fires and property destruction that they had not committed, they basically realized that, it doesn't matter anymore. If we're going to be blamed for it, why not just fucking do it anyway?
So I think, man, even if, number one, let me just be clear. I definitely do not think the undercover police officer was responsible for that vandalization. But second off, even if they were, it's so minuscule compared to everything else that was going on. It seems just too petty to me, in my opinion. Here in St. Louis, we definitely did have undercover cops mixed in with the protesters here during the Ferguson unrest. There was actually some a court case. An undercover cop actually got assaulted by police officers. It was kind of an interesting outcome. But the role that the undercover police played within within the protesters definitely was not instigation. It was just more eyes on the ground, kind of behind the scenes, close up view of what was going on.
Well, as someone who had resided in Minneapolis and interacted with the police, even though I am a white male, I fully understand that they are more than capable of that. I had long hair and a beard when I was going to college, and I was treated and threatened quite a bit by the police as if I was a drunk homeless person, even though I was never drunk outside of my apartment. So it's hard to envision how corrupt that police station is, that precinct, unless you're actually there. It's really, really hard.
And the thing is, a lot of police stations, they're very good about not messing with people in more upscale neighborhoods. Like, if you are a middle-class neighborhood, the police will treat you very differently than if you're from, a really low-class, poorer neighborhood. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And the neighborhoods that are being destroyed, Jeremy, they're ones that I was warned consistently of going to because, oh my God, there are black people that live there. That means you're getting shot in broad daylight if you even step foot on that part of town. So don't go there. Don't go there. And this was 10 years ago. I mean, it's bad. And guess what? I walked those streets after dark as a white cis male, did not get shot at. Why? Because I showed respect and I was nice to people and I was, observing the decorum that I needed to, not make them feel like they were being threatened. To make them realize that I'm not going to just randomly call the fucking cops on them because they're black. I mean, it's so much racism because of the way that our cities are structured, the major cities, because you don't usually see people of color in the affluent neighborhoods. You see them in the quote unquote ghettos and projects because those are where all the low income housing is.
Right. So I get that. But then, to burn down a low income housing apartment complex that was under construction, I also, I don't think that's the right way to handle the situation.
Well, when you're angry, you do shit. Do you think that the people who were burning Boston and boats and throwing tea into the harbor when we did the Boston Tea Party, do you think that was an unjust thing for people to do? Because that was a riot as well.
I think you're correct there, but I think that's also pretty mild in comparison to what's going on here. The Boston Tea Party.
Are you sure, though?
What
about the riots when we were trying to get labor laws? What about the riots during the civil rights movement? It's nice for people to be able to say, oh, it's unjust use of violence when it's happening. But history will show that, for better or worse, this will wind up being a justified use of violence from people to try and bring light to something that has not been handled properly through the many, 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 many peaceful protests that they have done, including the peaceful protest that I had to help break up when I worked as security during the Republican National Convention in Minneapolis in 2008.
Despite the constitutional right to peaceably assemble.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what you mentioned there, like, is this going to have a positive outcome in the long run? I think not.
I think it might not, but again, history will tell us 20, 30 years from now what happened. We're just living through it right now.
I see that Angelo and Sheridan have joined us. Would you guys like to comment on the news?
I've been commenting, actually.
Oh, have you been in the text chat? I mean, I know you've been commenting in the voice chat too, but I mean, you haven't commented at length Disdonn and Jeremy have been sort of dominating the discussion. I mean, would you like to introduce your point of view in full? And Sheridan, you haven't interjected yet.
Okay. So yeah, my point of view is kind of, how can I put this? I don't really have a whole lot of sympathy for the police departments So I feel like these riots are a result of a few things. They're a result of people being fed up with this pattern continuing because, police violence and stuff like that is not a new thing. There's been, huge news stories about this dating back for 30 years. But I feel like it's with more people being aware of it because of the lockdown, more people are inside, they're not working all the time and missing all these news stories. I feel like the outrage is a lot stronger than it typically is just because more people are getting to hear about it. And I feel like that anger is finally boiling over.
Yeah. Sheridan, are you on the mic today?
I am indeed, and I have to agree with Angelo. It's just at a boiling point. The tragedies of this week are just really incredible. To see multiple buildings set on fire and rioters actually become organized against such an egregious action. I was reading on Twitter the other day, and someone tweeted that it's impossible to conceive of reformation of what started as slave patrols. And I have to agree. It almost seems like police are meaningless at this point.
I mean, what is a police force if they're not protecting the citizens from crime that is, actually harming them? Right now, we've got the for-profit prison system that makes it so they get kickbacks for every person they put in jail for the most minor of offenses. It's almost like they're just trying to, harass the public as opposed to protecting and serving.
You brought up Nazi Germany at the beginning of the show, or right before. And I can't help but laugh not because it's actually funny, just because it's so extreme and it's so uncomfortable to go back and think. Yes, in earnest, you brought this up.
But is it?
But
really
but that's a parallel. I mean, I was going to say there's a good parallel there. Because I had said I don't think we have quite the same historical circumstances. But
I mean,
one
should
thing
I
we have in
compare
common
to
is what you just
Stalinist
said.
Russia or
hold on.
China?
What you said though is that you have a police force that is considered to be generally corrupt and kind of not trusted anymore by the populace, and by many considered to be more of a problem than an asset to American society. So you had kind of the same situation in Germany, in Nazi Germany. So that's kind of a good touchstone, I think.
Also, you have to think about the fact that police tend to protect their own regardless of whether they've committed crimes or not, which is another reason why there's a saying that cops don't go to jail unless they've committed such an egregious crime and it's documented well enough that they have no other choice. So it's I was talking to a friend of mine last night about this, and it's almost like a gang, like a street gang, in that sense. So there was we were joking that they should just be called the Bling Crips because they're thugs with a badge, and the ones that are the good cops aren't arresting the bad ones.
No, they're not. And typically the good cops are often the ones that get sent into the domestic disturbances where firearms are involved or other more dangerous situations first, and typically wind up being the first ones to be killed in the line of duty.
Yeah, definitely. And the thing is, a lot of the good cops are the ones that, like you said, you hear more casualties, whereas the so-called few bad apples tend to be the ones that are promoted, last longer, and even if they have committed crimes egregious enough to be fired, they just move to another precinct. There's literally nothing stopping them, and there's no permanent record that stays with them where they won't be hired again as law enforcement.
Or in this situation, the complaints are swept under the rug by Amy Klobuchar, who used to be working with the Minneapolis police force. I can't remember what her job was specifically, but she was a lawyer that worked with them for many years and helped them establish their connections with the for-profit prisons and helped put people in prison that didn't deserve to be for either low-grade offenses or for having the police plant drugs on them when they had none.
Yeah, and there was actually a term for that practice, which I can't remember right now, but it had become such a widespread problem among multiple police departments across this country that there's actually like their own slang term for it within their own departments.
And to remind our audience of the full phrase, a few bad apples spoil the bunch. When you have 1,000 good police officers and 10 bad police officers, and the first 1,000 don't report the other 10, then you have an entire precinct of corruption.
Turning a blind eye is not something that you should do, considering that they are paid through our tax dollars, and often because of the Patriot Act, given military-grade equipment. I don't understand why they aren't and haven't been held to a way higher standard over the last 10, 20 years. And as stated by Sheridan and Angelo, this is decades of police racism and corruption in a place that is typically seen as, since Minneapolis is definitely one of the larger tech hubs and larger retail hubs of the United States, and seemed to have a lot more well-off people of color who are in the middle class to the upper class. It had been seen as, a place where stuff like Ferguson could never happen. But Philando Castile a couple of years ago being shot by an officer, and now this, and it just seems like they finally got sick and tired of the peaceful protests not working, and it's just anger and rage and inequality boiling way over. And it's almost like if we had invested in those areas, if we had worked on rehabilitation and not criminalizing people who were trying to better themselves after being released from jail for nonviolent offenses, like there's just so much systematically wrong with our country that is led to this that we can't go back. We have to go forward and hopefully fix this. But right now, my feeling is that it's only going to get worse and be used as an excuse to grab more authoritarian power, considering Trump has tried to, through executive order, repeal a 1996 law that basically created the internet by making it so that internet websites aren't always responsible for things that are posted there, because he was fact-checked.
Yeah, that was a ballsy move by the Trump administration to sign that executive order. I think that's largely going to I think it's going to be largely political theater. It's obviously going to be challenged in the courts. It'll probably reach the Supreme Court, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be struck down.
I am not.
So during two crises, a racial explosion and a deadly, virulent pandemic, he's focusing on political theater.
Yep.
It's just so appalling.
Yep.
I think
All right,
it
guys.
will be struck down. Don, here's my reasoning, real simply. I think it would benefit big money for it to be struck down, right? So the conservative Supreme Court justices, their first loyalty is not to Trump, it's to big money. Am I wrong?
The two most recent conservative Supreme Court justices, their loyalty is to Trump. So I have a feeling that they will help turn the other conservative justices, which are the majority right now, towards, if not backing it, if it does get struck down, they will find some way in their arguments, which obviously will be retweeted and touted by Trump. And if he gets banned from Twitter, he'll just spout it on Fox News and Breitbart. But whatever happens, they will find a way to use it as a propaganda tool to try and state that, companies that try to censor Trump or, expose his lies are bad and unpatriotic and need to be removed. Trump has tweeted out earlier this week that Democrats and liberals need to be killed. So that's always fun.
Whoa! In what terms? In what words did he say that? I'm not aware of this one. I mean, it's not shocking.
He retweeted a video in which contained the words "a good Democrat is a dead one."
Wow. Okay. All right. Well.
Although I will say that I was trying to, I read a news story on this, and so I dug into Trump's Twitter profile to verify it, and I could not find it. So I know about this through.
He deleted it after he realized that it was not politically helpful for him.
Yeah, that tracks. So what do the rest of you guys think? Do you think that there's a chance the Supreme Court could uphold an executive order, I guess it would be, to enforce fact-checking and a sort of de facto censoring? Could that be upheld and then enforced? What do you guys think?
I don't think so, because it's actually the freedom of speech of the platform to do whatever they want. Because it's like, if tomorrow I decide to create my own social media, whatever, and I decide to do whatever I want, like on this platform, here are the rules, here's this, here's that. Okay, but if you don't like it, go on another platform. Right.
Well, the whole point of this executive order is that lower courts had already struck down Trump's complaint. Interestingly, one of the lower court judges that had struck down Trump's complaint was appointed by Trump himself.
There you go, right? Their first loyalty is to the rule of law, not Trump.
Well, I think that speaks rather to, that's a very optimistic way to read it, but I think that supports my initial case that their first loyalty is to the money.
Yes, I would have
it should be true.
Agree with Shale there, because especially with Donald Trump's tweets, the judges he picks are specifically there for business interests. Especially like the one that Jeremy linked earlier when he said, when the looting starts, the shooting starts, after describing that the governor of Minnesota has the full support of the federal military.
Thankfully, Minnesota has a Democratic governor who's been trying to keep people on lockdown during the pandemic and trying to encourage social distancing, use of masks, etc., much to the ire of the majority of my family, who over the last year has gone from being as anti-Trump as anti-Trumpers can get to being as pro-Trump as pro-Trumpers can get.
That's incredible radicalization.
That's an interesting progression, too. I wonder how exactly that came about.
Facebook.
So what changed their mind to pro-Trump?
The pandemic and the lockdowns. A lot of things had been circulating early on during COVID. A lot of the fake news and conspiracy theories that we've all probably seen about was created in a lab. It was created so that Democrats could control the population, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of shit about Bill Gates and injecting not a vaccine, but a tracker into people. Like it started being
the usual, right?
it started being shared and liked by more of my family, and mostly cousins and like my wife's family than had been done from any of the other stuff. I mean, they were very pro impeachment, a lot of them, because as poor white people who grew up in rural area where all that you got is factory jobs and basically working until you die and no retirement. I mean, they were heavily on the side of he's big money, he needs to go. And then as soon as the pandemic and lockdowns start, oh my God, we're forced to wear masks and not go to the store. Everyone's bad except Trump. It just really radicalized them.
I don't understand.
Quickly. And the reason why is because of income. Their places of employment shut down. Our Congress has only given one stimulus check, not monthly, not universal. So a lot of my family still hasn't seen their stimulus. They're barely scraping by and unemployed right now until things reopen. And so they're being radicalized very far to the right compared to where they normally would be, thanks to the pandemic and the lockdowns and the fact that our government is entirely failing the people and giving us crumbs while they're spending trillions upon trillions bailing out big business.
It's great to get your perspective because it is not like that at all in New York on the East Coast. Everything is just quiet and tense. There's not a lot of public interaction. Everyone just is like, hello. We just like nod. You know, we make sure we kind of humanize each other through our masks and we speak in simple, respectful terms. And
New York's also a lot more death.
Crazy. No, I guess it's maybe perhaps more real for us. Wow, heavy stuff.
Yeah, it is. And it won't get real for some of these people until it starts really affecting our nurses in the retirement homes. It's been in the homes. A lot of the elderly have been dying of coronavirus in my hometown and areas, but so far, none of the nurses have died. Some of them have gotten it, but have had very mild cases, luckily, or been asymptomatic. So it's just waiting until, more doctors and nurses in, Minnesota, rural Minnesota and North Dakota and South Dakota start getting the rampant death of other areas that will be when things start getting real for people. And until then, they don't want to wear masks. They don't want to stay home or any of it. Yeah. And it's just terrible.
They feel like they're just like victims of a sort of nanny state at the moment.
It's interesting. You guys were talking about like police brutality earlier, but it's like when I was growing up, like in a place like Beverly Hills, like we had the officers come in for the DARE program, like to resist drugs and violence. We also had like an officer who would come into our classroom and like be all nice and friendly to the students and like joke around with them and do these PowerPoint presentations. But I mean, as I've grown older, like I've seen like these ugly sides of like law enforcement that I couldn't even fathom when I was, that kid in school.
Funny story. Our DARE officer in my hometown was the same officer that bummed weed off me when I was in high school.
Nice.
He eventually got caught so much that they put him on desk duty, but they didn't fire him.
So he was selling weed?
Yep, selling and smoking weed with the high schoolers at what was known colloquially to us as the Temple, because there was a city park behind the high school that had these old stone or concrete structures that would, protect people from the rain, so that if it rained during an event, like a birthday party or something, they could still, have their little potlucks and crap. And that's where, during the before school and after school hours, we'd go and smoke weed, and he'd be there with us and just be like, yo, if you don't want me to report you, just, bum me a couple hits. Like, that's
Nobody ever
the way it
talks
was.
about things like enhanced sentencing for criminal officers, or mandatory minimum sentencing for criminal officers. How come that is never an issue that's discussed by any politician?
It's
Because
you have to get through
they're
the first structure of officers actually getting charged.
I can actually piggyback off of what Disdonn was saying. My experience growing up in a poor neighborhood was a lot worse. We had an identical car to a drug dealer in the neighborhood, and police would actually shoot at our house as a warning because apparently this drug dealer owed them their cut.
Wow.
And they would leave.
Great.
I had a cop actually leave creepy shirtless pictures next to our car and other weird shit like that.
Oh my god.
Damn.
Yeah,
And here-
was he posing, or was it
Yeah.
intimidation, or
To
it was
show
all
his
intimidation.
muscular frame, that's so weird. That's so
just
bizarre.
posturing, and it was all shot at
It
an
really
upward angle to
speaks
make
to
him look.
a really
so-
psychopathic person.
so like a
Yeah.
thug?
Think like I said, Bling Crip.
Right.
He was, the pictures were shot in a way that was angled to sort of show I'm intimidating, I'm lording over you, look at how badass I am. And we would wait, we would hear the bullets in the morning bouncing off of the thick 2-inch metal doors that we had in front of the house, and the cops were the ones that were shooting at the house. And when we reported them to Internal Affairs, Internal Affairs wanted to arrest my mother for reporting it.
Holy shit! Oh my god!
It's just I want to say unfucking believable, but it's really completely believable. Guys, I've heard this story 100 times because I'm an American.
Jesus Christ! It's damn, this is so. I don't know. This is just beyond me. So did Internal Affairs, did you get those photos and go to the news or something, or?
We lived in a poor neighborhood. Good luck just even getting a hold of the news. And either the cops wouldn't show up at all when we actually needed help. You could wait until after midnight just sitting out there. And again, bad neighborhood. The cops wouldn't show up if there was any sort of violence involved because in their exact words, there was a elevated threat to their officers' safety. But at the same time, every cop in the neighborhood would show up if there was a single nonviolent drug bust. They would have the street blocked off.
Yeah.
It's like you could, in theory, have some kind of class action lawsuit against that, but that kind of thing doesn't seem to come together.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of hard to class action lawsuit any form of the government, be it police officers or the state Congress or city hall or any of that.
Well, the thing is,
I guess I don't know the
courts,
details of the law.
The courts work closely with the police, so they maintain that very incestuous relationship. And prosecuting police doesn't create a very good relationship with police departments that they need to be able to prosecute people and keep generating money for the courts.
Really, this is just all why we need civilian oversight of the police in every, in many different ways.
Dang, I don't even know what to say. How have we as a country just let the scum rise to the top?
Because it's profitable.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because it's profitable, and because the police know that if you are in a higher neighborhood, for example, when I used to work as a security guard in an affluent neighborhood, the police response time was minutes. Just a middle class neyborhood, the police response time was, again, minutes. If you were in a poor neighborhood, they sent the cops that were more interested in practicing their martial arts on, teenagers that were being arrested for like smoking a joint outside than they were about actually protecting and serving. And I actually had a cop once tell me, their job isn't to protect us, it is to protect society from us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What if there was a minimum income to prevent poor neighborhoods from existing to begin with? Wouldn't that solve this problem?
Yeah.
Yeah, because the thing is, the reason why the cops will kiss ass to middle class and above is because they sort of gauge who can afford a lawyer, who's going to actually fight this in court. If they know that you can't afford a lawyer, they know that they can basically mess with you and they don't have to worry about any kind of repercussions.
Yeah.
This is so dark. Holy shit.
Well, we are in the darkest timeline.
Yeah. I think you can still find this video on Twitter, but there was actually a video of a lawyer that was arrested because she was trying to protect her client from the police illegally taking photos of her client. They literally arrested her on the spot in the courthouse, in the hallway of the courthouse right next to her client, and they arrested her for resisting arrest. That was the only charge. She was being charged and arrested for resisting arrest with no other charge, including probable cause.
Yeah, we need like a ground up reimagining of the entire police force in this country, I think.
Definitely.
We need a complete reimagining of the legal limitations of police power. That's more important because the definitions that our legal system uses to influence and apply those repercussions are what are stopping police officers from being violent, because they are literally trained gang thugs for the state.
Well, another lovely story from my area that my wife and I came from. When we were traveling back from our new home in Montana to go to her parents' 40th wedding anniversary back in September, I'd already changed my plates to Montana plates. And we were followed with no lights, no sirens, nothing by a police officer from the Wilkin County Sheriff's Office. But, he followed us for 15 miles. And we decided that we were not safe to try and pull over because this is the same area where, if you may have heard of it a couple of years ago, where Andrew Sadek was killed for being confidential informant for being a petty weed dealer, and then they got him into dealing and selling meth to try and bust some meth rings. He was going to NDSCS in Wapaton, North Dakota, and so with that on our minds, and the fact that my wife worked with that poor young adult's aunt in a nursing home for many years, thankfully my father lives there and he has many guns. He's former military, so he let us hang out in his porch and talk to him for a couple of minutes, and we saw the police officer disappear, and we started driving again, and then as soon as we get a mile away from my father's house, we get pulled over by this police officer who thought that we were trafficking drugs across the county lines. And when I told him, my blunt answers to all of his questions, he gave me a look like, dude, if your wife wasn't in the car and I probably would have to kill her too, I'd shoot you right now. And I am a white male, by the way. I'm a white male.
Oh, the police have been known to shoot more white males than anyone else. It's just the fact that it's poor white males, so it doesn't reach the news. But I have a similar story to that as well. My mother and sister had gone down to visit my great-grandmother's grave in Douglas, and the police followed them out of town. My mother actually noticed that they were way past their jurisdiction, so she didn't feel safe and continued driving. They chased her all the way down to the border of New Mexico. It was only after she crossed state lines and then went in a very roundabout way back to Tucson that she was able to avoid this officer who literally turned around once she had cleared the state line. But
Wow.
literally, she chased him from the border of Mexico, where Douglas is at, all the way to the border of New Mexico. Just, that's miles away. You're crossing pretty much the entire state.
Holy crap.
Why? Just, what is the motive for this officer? Why would they do that?
2 women in a car in the middle of a small town, because the officers there are corrupt as hell. The main judge that used to...
sadism?
Possibly. I can't really say for sure, but I know that most of the officers there had some serious corruption issues. And the main judge in that town was known for trafficking drugs. His nickname in the town was Cocaine Brain.
That's lovely. That's a great name for a judge. Is that it? Sounds like there was more to the story. It just ended really abruptly.
Oh, well, the thing is that judge, his brother was the mayor.
Yeah. Ugh.
So that just shows the kind of levels of corruption. And
yeah. In my college town, the mayor was arrested by the FBI for he was selling cars that were impounded by the local police department on eBay and just profiting the pocket. Just pocketing the profit. Just the mayor of Oswego when I was where I went to college, Oswego, New York. And when I was when I was in high school, I had a friend who worked at a 7-Eleven. He told me a story about how somebody comes in at 3 a.m. at 7-Eleven, starts taking off their clothes, and they go, "Hey, give me all the stuff I have for free." I'm just like, just keep taking off all my clothes. And they're like, "No, you're on camera. You're gonna pay for this. I'm gonna call the cops." The guy calls the cops. Cop shows up. He's a friend of this person. He lets the person go without paying for any of his stuff, and then the cop takes some stuff himself and says, "I need those security tapes, and don't ever call us again." Protecting and serving.
The hell? This was
That's America. That's America.
Yeah, protecting and serving themselves.
Well, they're doing exactly what their initial intention was, protecting and serving property interests. This is all centered around business. They need to keep the economy going and to keep property from being damaged. Because of the broken window fallacy, we all know it does increase GDP, but it also really is a setback to rebuild retail buildings, to rebuild police stations, to rebuild all of these infrastructure.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, well, the fact that the police station, and this is one thing that's never happened, well, not that I'm aware of. I should make that clear. This is something that I'm not aware of happening in the past, where most riots tend to hit businesses and stuff like that, but I've never heard of riots where a police station was burned down. And I think now that the cops are on the receiving end of that level of public outrage, they are not equipped to handle it, especially because they figured during an election year, the GOP has always been very vocal about, we support the police force, you can't blame the cops for a few bad apples, et cetera, et cetera. But realistically speaking, if it's a problem that has been happening so frequently for so many years, it's not a few bad apples, it's a pattern. And when you have a pattern, you need to address the underlying issue. And that's something that I don't think any of our political officials, public officials want to actually do.
No, because the status quo still benefits them. From Nancy Pelosi to Trump to McConnell, the status quo benefits them.
Cut out there, Dis.
The status quo benefits every politician.
And then there's the theory politicians are not supposed to be self-interested, but we have a system that selects exclusively for self-interested politicians. So if there's not a self-serving motive, it doesn't get done. And here we are, completely stuck in this situation with no legal ramification. We can't vote them out because the people who have a problem with it are already disenfranchised. There are no loopholes to work with. It's all closed off. That's why you get riots. Don, you said when you're mad, you do shit. Another way of saying that might be a riot is the language of the unheard.
As Martin Luther King Jr. stated before he was shot by our government for
That
being
is the one.
too much of a
yes.
problem.
And I think the other problem is that, you know, the courts that are supposed to prosecute the cops, because there's a known saying that police don't go to jail. And there's actually been literal arguments in court that they can't send police to jail because they'll be targeted by inmates. So they shouldn't be prosecuted. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that the courts and the police work hand in hand, because the police are the ones that generate the revenue for the courts. So they're not going to cut off their own revenue stream.
So we definitely got to fix that perverse incentive. Was there anything in Andrew Yang's platform about fixing that perverse incentive off the top of anyone's head?
Well,
I
besides
mean,
the
there's,
obvious,
Besides the UBI,
cameras,
but yeah, and body cameras. That's right. That was one.
Yeah.
What else?
Mandatory body cameras, and that the footage, because Andrew Yang actually knew that footage has disappeared in the past and stuff like that with body cameras. So not only were the body cameras mandatory, but the footage needed to be presented in court, and if it wasn't, the police department could actually be prosecuted for that, for destroying evidence.
So the way that he was wording it was, without the video evidence, the presumption of guilt changes so that the officer is presumed guilty for the time that the body camera footage is unavailable. The same way our property is presumed guilty until proven innocent.
Yeah, because with police being in a position of public authority, the greater authority that you give people, the greater the scrutiny that should come with that. And that was Andrew's argument for it, and I stand by what he said. I believe
funny.
that is actually a logical statement, that if you are given more authority, more power over people's freedom, then you absolutely have the responsibility of greater scrutiny.
I used to make a joke. I said, like, it looks like the Yang Gang helps out the community more than the actual police do. It's like, even though that we're called a gang, like, it's just irony.
And also remember, because of our lovely idiots in government, at least a handful of years ago, the Insane Clown Posse and Juggalos were considered a terrorist organization. Yet a lot of these people have been some of the ones who've been leading a lot of their community efforts to help people during the pandemic and getting food to the elderly. And it's just ridiculous. Also, I posted a tweet earlier in the live stream chat about how even though they looted and destroyed Target, they have set up tents and are redistributing that product that's been looted, especially water and food and milk, to protesters and those who need it. For the protesters, it's because water and milk helps with tear gas and pepper spray. And, the food, I mean, they're a poor community, and not everyone was able to get enough money to buy food recently because of the fact that a lot of stores have been closed down. And I can't remember which one of our members it was, but they were saying that when with the food delivery, you can't use your EBT.
That was Jacqueline.
Jacqueline. There we go. I'm like, was it Jolene? No, Jacqueline. Okay. I had a bit of a brain fart there. Yeah, Jacqueline was saying that, and that's true anywhere. So a lot of these people have been, barely getting by and trying to find people who have money to go and get the food delivered. And, now they are able to get some of that food now that they have looted the Targets and grocery stores.
Yeah, and Don, you'll find this interesting. My cousin CPN was actually part of those protests to get the Juggalos off of the FBI's gang watch list, which they were unfairly placed on. So it gave the police right to harass any juggalo that had a tattoo. My cousin was actually pulled over by police and was threatened when he refused to let them photograph his ICP tattoos.
Yeah, you read the story on the internet and it sounds funny and it sounds like it doesn't have ramifications, but there they are.
Well, the unfortunate truth is
be fine.
The unfortunate truth is that we have laws protecting things like that. For example, copyright laws. If you're was it a family member or friend?
Yeah, my cousin was the one that was threatened by police because the tattoos that he had were associated with the music group, the Insane Clown Posse, which fans of that music group were put on the FBI gang watch list.
So they're considered.
So it was a logo of the band, right?
Yeah, so if you have like the Juggalo hatchet or the clown, you can. He had
the hatchet man. He also had the all the Joker's cards album logos.
The legal way to protect against this would be for the band to have copyright over those images and usher copyright protection across all of their fans that are using these images.
They have tried. Unfortunately, they are, I mean, as much money as they do make from their merch and everything, they do not have the financial ability to sue the government ostensibly. Because, I mean, even though they do have copyright over their artwork, they do not have the ability to protect people because of that. However, if one does remember, just a couple of weeks ago, the band Insane Clown Posse publicly stated that they were not going to do their Gathering of the Juggalos this year, which is typically held in rural Michigan, as they are originally from Ann Arbor area of Michigan and suburbs of Detroit. And so, like, they also added that they were, hoping that people would be able to take care of each other during COVID and wearing masks and stuff. So it's like, out of all of these, vilified groups, they seem to be the most, cogent about what the fuck needs to actually happen right now.
They have a community sort of oriented perspective because they are actual poor people and they actually come out of a tradition of community music, like a little hip-hop community.
I just want to add some context. The reason ICP was put on the gang watch list was because of drug trafficking. And I think we're all aware that an insane amount of drugs is trafficked through this community of juggalos. I mean, I don't think we can dispute that.
Well, any music festival will be a hotspot for
that. There was actually a entire band that was made entirely popular because of the LSD and the LSD traffickers that followed it.
Fish. In the Grateful Dead.
Exactly. Both of those. And they got popular solely because they were a music concert that attracted in the right time for the market booms of these drugs. The music is honestly irrelevant. It's the camouflage for the drug industry that they are looking for.
Meanwhile, juggalos typically partake in the marijuana. One associated effect of the Insane Clown Posse that they have toured with many times is known as the Cottonmouth Kings. If you know what that is a reference to, bravo! You can give yourself a hit from the bomb.
I remember being a child. It's a funny little aside. I remember being a child and thinking, "Wow, what is so unique about these two bands, Fish and the Grateful Dead, that makes following them a viable lifestyle choice where it does not seem to be for any other band? What is so transformative about their music?" And only now do I know it was not the music at all, was it?
Well,
no,
the thing is,
it was not.
Willie Nelson famously smoked a joint on the roof of the White House.
Didn't he do that with Bill Clinton?
Yeah.
Wait, with Bill Clinton? When was this?
Yes, this was
smoked, but I didn't inhale.
Wait, so like when Bill Clinton was in office?
Yeah, he was invited.
No,
Willie Nelson
really?
was invited to stay at the White House.
Just like, I'm a bad president. I do what I want. He was like that, and
Bill
Willie
Clinton
Nelson was like,
famously-
"Yeah, you're cool."
Yeah, Bill Clinton famously said, "I smoked, but I didn't inhale."
That
But,
was the
yeah.
best line. I know. I just
Willie Nelson publicly has said multiple times that he smokes weed a lot. He's known for it. He's more than associated with it, and he's bragged about smoking a joint on the roof of the White House. I mean, it's not like that place wasn't surrounded by federal agents that knew that it was federally illegal, but still, it's Willie Nelson. Tommy Chong, for example, also is very famous for being associated with weed.
And Cheech Marin.
Cheech Marin, yeah. And no one really complains about their fans or puts them on watch lists. I mean, there's so many groups that are associated, especially groups from, the 60s and 70s, that are associated with drugs. And I cannot think of a single rock concert that I have ever attended where someone wasn't sparking up something.
I completely agree.
It's classism, and it's just the interests of capital and money and property being protected.
Well,
and
here's the bizarre
thing.
Here's the bizarre thing. This was completely political. If without the political pressures of the war on drugs and America's racism, or I mean not the war on drugs, but the Vietnam War and America's racism, drugs would be a completely legitimate industry today because the business incentives are that powerful.
I mean,
look at alcohol.
If you were to regulate, I mean, we've seen it in some states already, but if you were to regulate pretty much any drug that is illegal, heroin, aka, opium, aka morphine, ecstasy, MDMA, marijuana, LSD, if you were to legalize and make an industry for them, because of the way that the tobacco and alcohol industries receive so much subsidies and so much clout, they would be fucking huge.
Well, the thing is, there was someone running for president a few years back that actually had that as part of his platform, that, he wanted to just legalize all drugs because he felt like the government doesn't need to tell you drugs are bad. You can see it for yourself. That was Ron Paul.
Yeah.
Oh, that was 12. That was a while ago.
And his son has turned into Trump's Trump. He's got his head so far up Trump's ass, you can see him when Trump speaks.
Oh, Rand Paul? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, there's a difference between Ron Paul and Rand Paul that is such a stark divide. It's
more than two letters.
Sad.
He's not the ideologue his father is. He's more of an opportunist.
Yeah, whereas his father, spent years working in the government, and he was the first one to say what a lot of people were thinking but didn't want to say, is a lot of the problems we have now are blowback from groups that we helped fund decades ago. Like, we funded the Mujahideen that eventually became Al-Qaeda when the original leaders, moved aside, and we created people like Osama bin Laden. He was literally featured on the cover of Time magazine as, this perfect example of a wonderful freedom fighter fighting against the evil Soviet Union.
Yeah, we created a lot of our enemies. They don't tell you this very much, but remember Saddam Hussein? We helped prop his ass up. We helped prop up so many dictators in Africa and fucking South America. We helped fund the cocaine trade. We helped do all of this because we weren't able to directly fund these because we were fighting the Cold War. So instead, we funded them through paying for drug traffickers who would then move that money and weapons onto the governments and freedom fighters.
Oh, speaking of drugs, cocaine in particular, I remember a news story a few years back with a boat that was owned by Mitch McConnell, that family members of his were caught smuggling large amounts of cocaine. And do you think any of them actually did any prison time?
Not a one.
And do you think that the property and there's a law about this, do you think that the property that was used for the drug smuggling, which any American would have had seized from them, do you think McConnell got his boat back, or do you think that that property was seized as evidence?
Whoever took his boat.
Yeah, no, McConnell got his boat back.
Wow, I'm impressed that he was able to actually get his boat back. That takes a lot of legal money.
No,
And,
it just takes a position of authority where they know that if they kiss ass to him, he's going to filter money to their department.
And thank you for the post of that PolitiFact where it says that the story that it's been exaggerated that a 2014 drug bust on a cargo ship owned by Mitch McConnell was exaggerated. That is false. It was not exaggerated.
Yep, exactly.
That is a cover-up, blatantly.
I mean, you've seen pictures of Trump's desk in Trump Tower circulating recently, and how many packs of Sudafed he's got.
Note that it's not the American brand of Sudafed either. It's actually the European brand, which we don't sell in America because it contains drugs. It contains the chemicals needed to make methamphetamines.
Yes, it does, and it's also well known that he has decided to be on Adderall as well, which is, for those who don't know, it's a legal form of methamphetamine.
Though any good chemist will tell you that Adderall and methamphetamines, while chemically very similar, do have subtly different side effects, and that is a crucial difference. While I agree methamphetamine should not be the Schedule 2 that it is definitely different than the chemically laboratory grade manufacturing of medicines like Adderall.
Yeah, I mean, it is chemically slightly different. The side effects are a little bit less extreme, and they definitely had to work hard to make sure that those side effects were less extreme so that they could make it a legal, viable option. But it's very well known to actually help people who have ADHD because of the fact that their brain chemicals are overstimulating the receptors for those amphetamine-like drugs, and giving them a regular dose of those types of drugs then fills those receptors so they are no longer stimulated.
So I was actually on Adderall for a while, and its problems are pretty self-evident. Even as a treatment for ADHD, the tolerance skyrockets for anyone who uses it. So you need more and more to get the same effects as a medicine or as a recreational drug.
The same goes for pretty much any prescription drug. At this point,
most of them, there are some with reverse tolerances as well.
But at this point in my life, they really can't prescribe me any antidepressants for antidepressant use since I've been on them since I was 8 years old. But they can prescribe me antidepressants that are utilized in controlling migraines and dulling the pain receptors in the nerves to work against any potential fibromyalgia I may have, which is lovely.
I mean, gosh, I'm kind of taken aback by that. It's just like, I really want you to get into a state where you have better treatment options to manage your chronic pain and your other ailments. It's fucking tragic. I hate seeing you in pain, and I hate seeing you trapped in the situation you're in, knowing the only thing keeping you from better options is the law, a thing meant to protect, not harm you.
But anyways, I did sign a thing. I did sign a thing that was going around Twitter and Facebook that was suggested to me because of my location. So I signed a thing to legalize marijuana in Montana. So hopefully that option will be available for me soon.
That would be an incredible option, but really...
I think the right takeaway when we think about how similar, Adderall or what is that? Dextroamphetamine? It's not. I don't think it's a methamphetamine. It is an amphetamine. Adderall and the and methamphetamine are, when we think about it. I don't think the takeaway is like, wow, Adderall is so dangerous. I think the takeaway really should be methamphetamine is only a little bit more dangerous than a prescription drug, And it's like, make of that what you will. Prescription drugs can be extremely dangerous or pretty safe. I actually think I think the evidence, if you really look at it, shows that while meth is not a thing that people should generally be taking, probably most of the time, its negative effects have been greatly exaggerated for propagandist reasons.
I completely agree, Shale. More to Disdonn's point, though, as great as medical marijuana is, what Montana really needs, and what several very red states need, is the federal government enforcing the Medicaid expansion at a minimum and providing a Medicare for all solution as a normal proposal.
Well, the problem with the Medicare for all bill as it's written is it doesn't address a bill that was passed previously that basically says that the federal government cannot negotiate drug prices. We are subsidizing the creation of the drugs, and Andrew Yang touched on this on the campaign trail. We are subsidizing the creation of the drugs, but we are not allowed to negotiate the price. We are required to just accept the price as is.
Another win for Big Pharma.
Another thing that Andrew Yang had something in his platform to address. Perhaps in 2024 we'll get there.
Or perhaps in 2020 we will be able to strong arm certain people who are the presumptive nominee to actually taking some of these policies and moving the Democratic Party to the left because of how fucking extreme Trump's being right now.
To be honest,
I don't think there's any chance of that.
I think it'd be easier to strong arm Tom Perez into nominating Andrew Yang as the DNC's presidential nominee than it would be to get Biden to actually hold a policy together for 5 minutes.
Nothing will change Biden. He has no incentive to change. He's a million years old. He knows what he knows. He thinks what he thinks, and he's going to do this. And who knows if he even intends to do 2 terms in his mind. I think I don't think he even wants to do it. So he's just going to do what he's told, and he's never going to be told to give us basic income.
That's why if we tell him to do it, if he does what he's told, maybe it'll fucking happen. Otherwise,
he doesn't do it when we tell him. He does what his financial backers and owners tell him, and they are never going to listen to us.
It's like sometimes I wonder if it's just better if like Canada just invaded the U.S.
They don't have the power to. I would love if we could. If New York would join them, but we don't have that option. And sure. I wish I could. If they had like open immigration, I would have been gone. I wouldn't be doing this podcast. Maybe it's for the best. Maybe it's for the best I'm here.
They did offer California to join them when California was threatening to secede. They're like, we'll take you guys if you want.
Sure.
But I would say, all hubris aside, our country has a lot of issues that need to be addressed, and I feel like Andrew Yang was the only one that's actually going into this with the mindset of a problem solver, not the mindset of a politician where it's like,
right,
I have to do what is politically advantageous to me, even if it's not what the country needs, it's what gets me elected.
Yeah, it's funny they say that like Canada is this apartment living above a meth lab. Yeah, it seems if we're.
Oh man, I've heard that so much. It's so true.
Yeah, my Canadian friends are just like, I take a look at your news and I look at my news and I'm surprised at just how crazy it is down there. You guys don't have basic income. You guys aren't practicing social distancing. You have hundreds of thousands of people dying of coronavirus, and your president is a bigoted racist. What the hell's going on down there?
Want to have health care.
We wanted freedom so much. Freedom is America's meth.
Yeah, but like freedom is different from just being a psycho lunatic that just runs in the street naked and shouting and doing what
Freedom from everything but want.
Right.
Freedom is a hell of a drug.
Mm-hmm.
Freedom from accountability, freedom from responsibility.
Yeah,
Right.
and those are the two cornerstones of true freedom is you are free, but you also bear the ultimate responsibility for that freedom.
To quote Jean-Paul Sartre, your choices, the choices you make, should be ethically and morally the choices of the world. That responsibility and guilt is on you.
And then people wonder why my generation are having less kids. I think I don't know.
Oh yeah, like the birth rate's at an all-time low. It's so low. Does anyone know what it is right now?
It's probably almost negative at this point.
Well, I mean, who wants to invite a guest into a meth lab?
I mean, the thing is that with how much vilification of immigrants Trump is doing, he is permanently fucking over the country because he is also helping us have a lower birth rate than ever because of the state of the world right now. And so the only way to combat the negative birth rate to death rate, because we have a very aging population, much like other countries like Japan, we may soon have to pay people to immigrate to this country and or immigrate to marry and bear children in this country, because we are at the point where our next couple of generations, our quote-unquote labor force is going to be non-existent.
Well, given the rise in automation, I don't know how much of a problem that's going to be for business, especially big business, because they don't need as large a labor force as they did before. And as Andrew
But they
has
still
said,
need consumers.
Yeah, they still need consumers, but like Andrew has said, we're seeing 10 years of automation in 10 weeks. So realistically speaking, as long as businesses have people that want to buy stuff, they're...
So I would love to discuss a little bit more about this because businesses really don't need consumers. What businesses at their core need is cash flow. And that doesn't have to come from individual consumers. It can come from big business. It can come from government spending. It can come from financial speculation within their own company. What might even happen if we keep following this incredible oligarchical path with no basic income is companies just basically buying people to live as a citizen of that company, and that company will buy food from other farms.
It's like the dystopian, end to neoliberalism, like the eventual, when the end of the river or something.
So
there's been a lot of sci-fi movies.
More
How's
than
that
wage
for
slavery.
freedom?
Yeah, there's been a lot of sci-fi movies over the decades, but especially in the 1980s when consumerism was at its height. And they say movies are a reflection of society and societal problems. A lot of those movies centered around the idea of corporations becoming so powerful that they become the de facto government. And in many ways, it's seen as a crazy idea up until we look around now. We're like, that's kind of starting to happen. That's a little bit creepy.
The amazing thing with companies is they are fundamentally different from governments from an economic perspective. Governments are currency creators. Companies are currency users. The story of debt and inflation, deflation, everything between those two entities are completely different. Whereas a company going into debt could be disastrous depending on what they're speculating on. A government going into debt is just more money in the overall system, so you pay for it with inflation. So the concept that a company can become so large that they become a valid currency creator would be an international incident. And it's why Amazon and Jeff Bezos says their only concern is the U.S. government, because they don't have the appropriate authority to start making their own currency.
Well,
Yet.
Wasn't Facebook trying to do that?
Yeah, Facebook
Yep.
was actually doing Bitcoin. Well, not Bitcoin, but a form of their own form of cryptocurrency. I forget what it was called.
It was called Libra Coin, and they were going to use it not quite as a full currency. They were going to use it as like Chuck E. Cheese tokens for Facebook.
Similar to the Reddit Gold model.
Like, what role do you guys think that our schools and education systems are going to play in all this? Just train us to be.
Yeah, they're just going to train us to be good consumers, to spend the money and do what we're told, and just be slaves
that would be
to
an
corporate
improvement.
overlords.
That would be an improvement in our current education system. Our education system will probably hold to its legacy architecture and not do any major improvements besides a few new classes added in a couple of states.
Yeah, sadly. And the
Still
thing
teaching
is,
us Shakespeare.
Yeah, because the thing is, most businesses, most schools, when you leave high school, your high school diploma says, I am trained well enough to work a baseline job at this skill level. Now, decades ago, and we're talking 1930s to maybe early 1960s, you could still find a good paying job where a single person could actually afford to buy a house, buy a car, and support a wife and children on a single breadwinner. And this was true up until Ronald Reagan with Reaganomics.
Yeah, you could get like a diploma, work in some factory, and afford like a house, a family, a nice vacation once in a while. Now you're lucky to get like a 4-year degree and owe nothing but debt, and even either get like a low-level service job or not even that. Even it's like completely unfair to our entire generation what these scum suckers at the top have done.
Yeah, because decades ago, you didn't need a high school diploma to be able to work in food prep or other jobs that were minimum wage. Those were considered like teenager jobs. Those were summer jobs that kids would do to make a little bit of extra money and get some work experience. Now, most job applications for minimum wage jobs ask if you have a high school diploma or GED as a qualifier just to get that job. So it
everyone
closes
goes
out the
down
market
a
for
notch.
teenagers.
And then the jobs that used to just require high school, like maybe there is a manufacturing job, but now they're asking for a bachelor's degree. It's like, what the fuck, And yeah, everybody just gets hit down. It's like this academic inflation that we have, and it's completely idiotic because the degree doesn't even correlate to the job at all.
Well, it's not that the degree doesn't correlate. It's that we've become so advanced. Your description of academic inflation is very accurate. Farming today requires a PhD and several thousand people working major million-dollar machines to produce the billions of dollars of food that we do every year. We have just advanced that much that everyone needs to be so well educated that they can't get stuck in the middle income trap where they just earn enough to survive.
Well, I don't know if that's entirely true because I worked for a security company that required at least a bachelor's degree to work for affluent clients, and literally your degree, it didn't matter what it was in, as long as it was a bachelor's degree. And this was a job that required on-the-job training, where it was not any different from the jobs that you were doing for non-affluent clients that
a lot
required
of
the exact
personal
same
characteristics. For example, goal setting and completion. That's a lot of what interviewers are looking for when they ask for degrees without a specificity. And especially for a security guard, they want to see that you can stay loyal to a goal.
Well, the only thing is, the only difference between working for an affluent client and working for a regular standard security guard job that they had available because the posts.
Oh wow,
it
they
was
had
a
two
difference of
different
the-
jobs.
Yeah, they were the same job, and that's what I'm trying to get at. If you worked for an affluent client, the only difference is your uniform required you to wear a blazer and tie when sitting at the desk versus a more military-looking uniform when sitting at a desk. The job was literally identical.
Wow.
One of my professors called it stick-to-itiveness. When you said stick to, I couldn't even believe that was a word until I looked it up.
I mean, I only have an associate's degree, and I've had that problem at pretty much any entry-level position is asking for a bachelor's. Not in any particular place, not because you need it, not because your job will ever require you to know any sort of advanced anything, but a lot of entry-level positions where it's not retail or fast food or working at a bar, almost all of them require you to have a bachelor's degree.
Yeah, that seems so strange to me. Maybe it's just different here in Missouri. So I'm not sure what the nationwide statistics are, but 70% of the working population here in Missouri don't have any degree other than a high school diploma. I've had some pretty well-paying jobs in the past.
I guess that's where I'm going to move to.
Yeah, it's never been an issue that I don't have a college education.
That is interesting.
Interesting. Maybe Missouri's the only state that's not completely up their own ass, but I don't know.
Well, it's not just that. That's the amazing duality of a lot of rural markets. Is rural markets need more basic things more readily. So rather than California having a massive supermarket, rural Missouri needs farmers, just any farmer.
Well, I'm talking St. Louis, not exactly the most rural area.
It's just on a statistical spread. Like Missouri is half the population of California at best.
Right, and like a super megapolis like LA, it's just supply and demand. There are just so many damn people they can ask.
And that's why inflation growth is such a key target indicator for economists, because that accounts and allows for people to keep getting some level of income. But we've grown out of inflation economics, and we need to start focusing on population economics with a basic income that accounts for every person's needs.
Right. So like when I used to work at the Best Buy, there were like these food places, like right next to me. And on my lunch break, sometimes I would go and like buy things from them. But then, like my manager said, after the seasons, hardly anyone comes. So we're going to have to cut the employees. So guess what? I'm not going to those places to be a patron to eat anymore. And they're not getting my business anymore because I have no need to do that. So, and then don't be surprised when maybe some of the people who used to work in those places lose their jobs too. It's a ripple effect.
Yeah, and I wanted to make one more point on the need for higher degrees for mundane jobs that don't require those degrees. A lot of it has to do with supply and demand. If there is an oversupply of qualified workers and a low demand for those workers because of limited jobs, then the rest of the job market says, okay, well, we have all these people with degrees that are a dime a dozen. Let's, use that as a bar for entry, even if it's not pertaining to this job. Just do you have a degree at this level so that we can raise our company's profile, saying, look at how many people that we've hired that have degrees.
Oh, yeah.
That gets into another amazing segment of our current corrupt capitalism.
It's completely masturbatory. Sorry, that's
where companies will react solely on what the market is like that they're interacting with, rather than on the service that they're providing. Rather than trying to get a profit off of charging a markup over their cost, they will try to figure out what the market could bear in terms of cost, and then figure out what they can get in profit afterwards. The same applies to the labor market as well, where they see all these people and they're like, "This is the bar."
You stopped at this is the.
Oh, this is the bar. It was just the stop.
very low bar.
Well, actually, an unnecessarily high bar for the labor markets. And
Oh.
also for some of the consumer markets as well, because they figure out what they can extract from their consumers and then figure out what profit afterwards.
Right. And then not to mention ATS, like application tracking systems that like you're just interacting with some invisible gatekeeper, and you don't even know what the hell this invisible gatekeeper wants or to see from your application. So it's like completely bullshit. And then you have the older people just going like, oh, when I was your age, I would just walk in and ask for a job and they'd give me one. Why can't you just do that? So,
My father has done that to me all the time.
Yeah, tell him to get you a time machine and we can go back to those easier labor markets.
I had told him that, and then he just laughed. And then he smoked a cigar.
Ah, a true era classic.
Yeah,
He only smokes a
that's the
cigar
right
because
response,
he's trying to be a fucking wannabe mobster, but, family history does preclude that.
Well, I mean, I'm not above enjoying a cigar once in a while, but what we're seeing now is, I feel like, a higher bar of entry. Like, they want more and more people, but I think a lot of it has to go with perception and the belief that if you have more people that have degrees, it doesn't matter if their degree has nothing to do with the job that they're in, they're able to use that as a selling point and boost their public perception. That's all it really is look at, everyone in this office has a bachelor's degree. They don't have to say what the degree is in, but the public perception is, oh, I can trust this business because I'm dealing with a lot of professionals that know what they're doing, even if their degree could be in, something like geology and they're working in an office that's selling insurance.
Or Betsy DeVos trying to direct a Department of Education and only having a associates of physical education.
Betsy DeVos doesn't have a bachelor's degree?
I don't believe so, no.
Oh my god. Fucking. Oh.
I mean, if she does, it's definitely not in anything education related.
Yeah, it is definitely only in physical education. I know that.
Just okay. So go figure. Like, all these stupid employers are asking for a bachelor's degree, and our own Secretary of Education doesn't have one. Just hypocrisy at like the highest point. Just like double standards. I don't even know what to say.
It's all about who you know and never what you know, because now that we have the internet,
Right.
What you know is meaningless now.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And the funny thing is, if she does have a higher degree, it's probably in finance.
Yep.
That seems to be a popular one.
She has a bachelor of arts degree in business economics.
Ah, nice.
So finance, business, finance, economics, same difference. They're all
exactly the same, especially a bachelor of arts. Oh my god!
But if it would behoove the chat to move on to the article or thing that I posted, the world can only get more fucking insane. Apparently, they were using a troop of monkeys in India to test vaccines in a COVID lab, and they stole and escaped with blood samples of coronavirus patients. Oh my fucking god! We're trying to create
biohazardous.
Yeah, we're trying to create a virus so fast with so little oversight that this shit is about ready to go down.
Well,
this is very much a Hollywood scenario.
At least it didn't happen in the like just for once, like India
or a
does
Bollywood scenario, I suppose.
Just so India does something dumb, so people like can point away from just the complete stupidity of this country.
So I have a question: was Jay and Silent Bob involved in this?
Right,
no.
Right. It's like view askew here. This is absurd. No, but I mean, is it now? Are we overreacting? Is it necessarily? What's the realistic possibility of a transmission from the material that was stolen by these monkeys?
Actually, it's pretty decent.
Well, it's blood samples, so it's pretty decent if they if someone gets in contact with those blood samples.
Also, what you can do, as far as in terms of a bioweapon, is literally take that blood sample and put it into an explosive and detonate it aerosol at medium altitude. The detonation would be very tiny. You could literally just tie the blood bag to an M80 and a drone, and you're talking about a wide aerial dispersal rate of the disease
Again,
at a high concentration.
But the monkeys don't have that kind of technology.
No,
even
but...
if there was a malicious actor, the real use of those kinds of weapons are threat agents. The spread isn't going to be that dangerous, especially from airborne. It's more concerning if it's like inside, or if the monkeys rip open the bag and start smearing it along residential areas, and children and people walking by have a walk on it, and they track into their homes.
Yeah, that could happen. Monkeys do that kind of thing. Ugh. Could the monkeys also be infected themselves and then infect humans?
Well, that is the other thing. They were using those monkeys as test subjects, but the thing that's really scary about this is that
hold on, dude. Where in the article does it say that they were using them as test subjects?
I've seen many articles that have been saying that they've been using mice and monkeys and other
I just mean that the blood could infect the monkeys, and then the monkeys could infect people.
Disdonn, this specific article doesn't mention that these monkeys were being used as test subjects. They simply happened to attack a lab technician.
I think there's wild. I think there's wild monkeys. I mean, I posted a video in the chat. I mean, you can see what these wild monkeys are like.
That's amazing.
I mean, they're just massive. What do you call a group of monkeys? Like, it's like a swarm.
A troop, I think. A troop.
Okay, there you go. But
I mean,
a troop of monkeys is the plural now, the collective noun.
Yeah, if you get attacked by these monkeys, not much you can do.
My point is less about the monkeys or the possibility of them spreading the disease. It's more about how we're trying so hard to make a vaccine and study this virus, yet it's becoming quite obvious that some of the places that are being contracted to study don't have a lot of proper security protocols. I mean, how did those monkeys get into a lab? Typically, you'd have to use some sort of key card or passcode entry and, go through some sort of decontamination, you'd assume.
The article describes it as a technician was walking across a courtyard on a campus. So it was open air.
But why did they have the samples in open air?
Because in India, the campus probably doesn't have that much money.
Yeah, you got to collect the sample. You got to store the sample. You got to transfer it for testing. I mean, there's a long list of legitimate reasons of why it would.
Yep, and that just reaffirms that's like there's a lot of places in these chains for virus vaccine discovery that can be interrupted or broken down, and India. This particular place is one of thousands that is working frantically right now on a vaccine. So, I mean, how long before something stupid happens and you have people who are doing these transportations that make a human error, they drop it, they get attacked by protesters, anything. How long before something like that happens and we wind up with a large group of people that is infected from a medical mishap in our attempts at creating a vaccine?
Well, that's an interesting idea, although it also begs the question that this is such a global issue that it's bound to be increased significantly just because of how many different countries are working on it right now and how many places may not have the facilities to be able to do it, so they're making do with what they have just to be able to get something out.
Yeah, it's definitely showing that we have some major infrastructure issues with how countries deal with pandemics, because we don't have protocols for how to handle this. We used to, but those got thrown out the window.
Well, the thing is, and this is something that kind of disturbed me about this whole outbreak when it first happened, is this is, forget the conspiracy theories and everything. Consider this a benign thing that just happened. It's a new virus that just hit the scene. But the response to it was so half-assed that it makes you wonder what would happen if an actual planned malicious bioweapon was deployed in this country.
Well,
It would be the end of this
epidemiologists,
country. Like the U.S. would be over, done.
epidemiologists have actually been pointing at this pandemic as the most likely scenario if a deadly disease was weaponized. This is pretty much what would happen. We would see an R spread rate of about 2, and everyone would be vulnerable. It would shut down economies and cause incredible social unrest. This is
That's
what we would
happened.
see.
And
But the
do you think
fact
that
that
there
every
aren't people in
country's
governments right now, particularly less than savory governments around the globe, that's looking at this and saying we need to boost our bioweapon departments because this is now a more viable option than it was during the Cold War?
It's still not a viable option.
I
The
think it's
cost of actually artificially creating a virus, or even artificially mutating a virus, are still insanely high. Even with CRISPR technology, we can't get that specific because our understanding of DNA itself is not that deep.
like I think it's so effective against a country like the U.S. because of my freedoms and okay,
Or a country with a lot of cultural tension is very vulnerable to civil unrest, and a country with a lot of economic inequality. So yeah.
The U.S. is absolutely far more volatile because of our structures.
You know what would help? A basic income would probably help with that social unrest, wouldn't it?
This is the thing. It's like even if you want to convince the jackasses, some of them at the top, basically a no basic income, it's like something that hits rock bottom, and when it drills beneath the ocean floor, everyone goes down a notch, because whether you like it or not, the pain and the suffering is going to make its way to the top, and it's already at the top. But when you have a basic income, it's like a rocket ship that attaches everything to it and just goes up. So even the super wealthy can live like much better lives and not have so much stress if we did have a basic income for everybody. But not having it, not only does it get rid of the floor, but everybody goes down the notch.
But it can also a case can also be made that it makes us far more safer from a national security standpoint, that if we ever did encounter a major weaponized attack on our country, we would be in a position to actually handle it and not worry about it. But in the absence of a basic income, we would suffer what we're experiencing now with the risk of market collapse and civil unrest.
Okay, look at San Francisco. Like, there are super rich tech people like walking over homeless people. That one homeless person has the coronavirus and can't get sanitizer or help, whatever. What's to stop the homeless person from spreading the infection to that techie, like rich person who's just around the same vicinity? Nothing.
And remember, a lot of the cases that they have been finding of people who are either testing with the antibodies or people who are testing as positive after being tested are asymptomatic, which means that tech person might not feel the effects, they might not have symptoms, but they'll be able to breathe and cough and sneeze on so many other people spreading the infection without knowing that they have it until at least one of them becomes very deathly ill with it. That is the real, true, scary thing about this virus. That any of us could have it, any of us could be carrying it, and just be asymptomatic and be spreading it to our loved ones, which is why they encourage A, social distancing, B, masks, and C, just generally not going out and doing things unless you absolutely have to.
Right. And you guys were talking about national security. I think it's much more easier for a foreign entity to like bribe someone who lives here to do damage to this country if they're not even getting a basic income. They're like, well, my country doesn't give a damn about me, but this, Mr. Foreigner over here wants to like help me out if I just like, reveal, sensitive information. So hey.
And we've had that with people in the military because officer pay is really good, enlisted pay is typically not. So that's been a problem in the past, much less the present. But from a national security standpoint, it's like something as simple as a virus, and if they don't have to worry about it coming back to their shores, like North Korea, countries like those would be far more interested and a bit more short-sighted about actually deploying a weapon of that type. So that's the scary part about it.
Yeah, 100%. It's funny, Disdonn, you mentioned like we shouldn't be out and about. You would think that like California is like one of the smarter states, but good news, I just got the unemployment extension that just went into effect. I was so happy. But then it said for each week you need to provide us with 3 jobs that you apply to. And I'm like, you gotta be freaking kidding me. I thought you would like waive that thing. But I just put like remote. I apply to remote jobs. Those are the only jobs that I'm gonna apply to.
See, that's the thing. That's one of the reasons why we're having such trouble and why the extension of unemployment benefits is not actually helping, because 90% of the states have some form of means testing bullshit like that to keep your unemployment. I had to do the same thing when I moved to Montana and had to be unemployed because of moving. And it's like, yo, I live in this town with 120 people. There are no jobs. Where am I going to apply to? So I had to actually call them, wait on hold for over an hour and a half, and then tell them what the hell was going on for them to waive that for me. But most people won't. So where are these people going to be applying to?
Did they waive it?
Yeah, they did.
Okay.
But most of these places that people are going to be applying to is going to be places like retail and bars and other places where you're A, going to be in contact with a lot of people, and B,
Right.
Some of them might not necessarily have online applications, or if they do have online applications, they're sure as hell not going to be doing online interviews. They're going to have you called in and do the interview face to face. So
Right.
it's just means testing is literally killing people now.
Well, they're in no position to enforce their means testing right now, because that would just drive them insane, because they're like millions of people in California. So I doubt that they're going to scrutinize over anything that I provide.
But they have been.
Well, I have an interesting side comment on this, and I wanted to ask Sheridan, because you seem to like looking into facts and figures and find the real numbers interesting. A lot of coronavirus deaths now, they're discovering, are happening in younger people. It's just not attacking the lungs. A lot of younger people are dying from strokes because they now realize the coronavirus attacks more than one part of the body. Have you found any information on the increase in stroke or other forms of unnatural deaths that have been occurring in younger people?
Well, not particularly the numbers in younger people, but we've known for a couple months now that COVID specifically isn't just a lung destroyer and a pneumonia inducer. It also breaks into the heart and starts attacking the mitochondrial or the myocardial cells in the heart. And it's not too big of a surprise that they will also find their way into the brain and start creating clots, probably from the heart damage. So we've known for a couple months now that COVID does attack other organs, but it is not like its main course. It definitely is a more of a side effect.
Terrifying. All right.
I mean, the main avenue that coronavirus gets into most people is through the airways because it is airborne on droplets of people who are breathing, sneezing, coughing. So it is more likely for it to settle in the throat and lungs first and foremost. And then after, if it gets into the bloodstream, then it can go all over the rest of the body. But yes, I mean, typically the first avenue is the respiratory.
What a nightmare we're living in, huh?
Yep. And we're only halfway through the year.
Yeah, I'm presumption that there can be and will be a vaccine. So
yeah,
there's a presumption. Why are we assuming this? Yeah,
well,
it's like we just go on it.
Speaking of COVID, and kind of, I wanted to link back to a topic we were talking about before. I was actually horrified to see that there is a mass riot mass protest in Phoenix that was, starting to really get into dangerous territories of going from a protest to a riot. But the protest in Phoenix, what scared me is how many people were standing in very close proximity to each other during the protest, where I think people's anger is blinding them to the other side of it, which is like, oh yeah, we still have this pandemic going on.
Yeah. The fact that there's a lot of people who aren't wearing masks in all of these protests is getting kind of bad.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't be going, out in public, especially if I knew I was going to be standing shoulder to shoulder with someone, unless I had like a full on, suit, respirator, like basically military mop suit.
That's you mean like the Hong Kong protesters do?
Yeah, like full gas mask,
it has
fully sealed,
more or less.
Yeah. Well, a mop suit is basically a military version of a hazmat suit. It's got it's got the mask, the gloves, everything.
Biohazard armor. Yeah, biohazard combat gear. All right, yeah, that's what you need out there.
So, with all these riots and demonstrations taking place, with people being so close proximity and not everyone wearing masks and us having a pandemic, is this going to be the second wave of infection in 2 to 3 weeks now?
Yeah, that's really could. It really could be.
And remember that already we're dealing with, since they don't have the money to go to the doctors, a lot of minorities already are having high death rates from this.
Yeah, this is going to be the real test to see if these transmission rates are really being exaggerated or not. I mean, in conjunction with the lack of social distancing over the Memorial Day weekend, along with these protests and riots. So it's a very dark experiment, but it could show some promising figures for the future.
Well, it also could just show that the virus does not transmit as well during warmer months, as well as some have hypothesized, but we don't know that for certain yet. And if it is not that, and it's actually what's been predicted as far as the transmission rate, we are on the precipice of some serious deaths.
Yeah, well, it seems like a good place to wrap it up. It's 11:59. We got a 1 o'clock show, so this is a really good episode. We stayed on a pretty tight focus this whole time, but we've had some pretty extraordinary news. So I'm glad that you all could make it. I'm glad we could have this conversation together. and record it. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Let's just say, before we say goodbye, Jeremy, remind us what's going on at 1 p.m. in an hour.
In 1 hour, we have an interview with Read My Lips, News and Politics. He's a very Yang Gang YouTube streamer, and I think he's going to have some pretty interesting opinions and takes on the recent protests around the country.
Excellent. Great. So come back for that. Hopefully I'll see a bunch of you back for that in an hour. I'm going to go take a break and get Craig out of here. So before we do that, I guess we should say our Twitters, though, right? So just starting with you, Angelo. There we go.
My name is Angelo Mendoza, and you can find me at HellionHellfire.com, or just at HellionHellfire.
Ariel.
Yeah, my name is Ariel. Oh, and I just wanted to say, like, for the record, like, I do search for jobs, and all the jobs that I put on the list are clean. You know, just in case
For legal reasons.
Yeah, for
Right.
legal reasons.
Gotcha.
I didn't.
Understood.
If this ever gets into their hands, which I doubt, they'll know that.
You have an alibi.
Yeah, exactly. Like, yeah. So, yeah, my name is Ariel, and my Twitter is at ARIELS_ARMADA. That's Ariel's _Armada. And you can find me at youtube.com/revolutionary thinking.
Thank you. Disdonn.
I'm Disdonn. You can find me on Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube at Disdonn Plays. On Twitter, DISDONNPLAYS, and youtube.com/Disdonn Plays and twitch.tv/Disdonn Plays.
Jeremy.
Hi, this is Jeremy. You can follow me on Twitter at JeremySammons1, and that is JeremySammons and the number 1.
And finally, Sheridan.
Thank you, Shale. I'm Sheridan. You can find me on Twitter at JSaberGamer. And please do protest. Be safe. Wear a mask. Wash your hands.
I am at SHAELRILEY on Twitter. Stay safe. Take care of everybody you can. Take care of yourself. Don't get the coronavirus. And, try to survive. Hope we'll see you very soon.